Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Amanda Dye. I'm the Director of Advising and Programs at Beyond Barnard, and we're excited to welcome you here today for Career GPS for first years. So in the fall semester, we usually focus this particular event on thinking about themes surrounding career exploration. So with that said, I have a little presentation. I'm going to start sharing that, and you should hopefully be able to see the screen now. So to get us started, today I want to talk a little bit about why self-assessment is important for thinking about careers and thinking about kind of what you want to do both during and after college. We'll talk a little bit about ways to think about networking, mentoring, gaining experiences, all things that are relevant for career exploration. And we'll talk about some of the resources at Beyond Barnard that can help you with all of this stuff. So agenda is pretty simple. We'll talk briefly about kind of like what is the career exploration process? What are you thinking through when you're exploring careers? We'll talk about self-assessment and its role. We'll talk a little bit about networking and mentoring, gaining experiences, next steps and resources with Beyond Barnard, and then I'll save most of the time, I hope, for Q&A. So to get started with the career exploration process, the first thing that I want to say is we are all in a period of adjustment. So those of you who are new to campus certainly are probably experiencing the typical transition to college, which is not easy in the best of circumstances. And you're doing it in a world that we're all not really used to yet. I know that you have finished your high school studies in a time of a lot of uncertainty and a lot of difficulty for us, personally and professionally. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that you're not behind, you're not alone. Everyone is experiencing these feelings of uncertainty and not exactly knowing what they want their next steps to be. And so my hope is today that what we'll talk about will help you to start thinking through the things that are actually important to you and how you want to start taking your next steps. So with that in mind, I ask you to reflect. You don't have to say anything to anyone, but just take a moment to think about why you came to college. So, there are a lot of reasons for people to pursue a college education. Sometimes it's related to a particular career path. Sometimes it's because it's related to upward mobility in the world. Sometimes it's because you're really interested in a particular field of study. Think about what your reasons are. Think about what you're hoping to get out of your education. Maybe think about not just why you came to college, but why you came to Barnard in particular. And what are the things that are really most exciting to you about the world that's going to open up to you during your time here and your time after college. So just take a second to think. All right, so hold those things in mind as we talk through the next few slides and think about these questions relating to career exploration. Thinking about your interests is important because if I know Barnard students, one thing I know about them is that they're interested in a lot of things. And that's amazing, right? Like that's actually a great position to be in because then you have lots of avenues to explore. So if you're interested in kind of everything, right? There are lots of things that you could potentially see yourself exploring professionally or on a volunteer basis or otherwise. Think then about like the things that you really like, and then think about the things that you like that could also be a job, right? So for some of us, there are things that we love to do, but we know that those are not necessarily things that could be a job. Like, I love hanging out with my niece, but I cannot get paid for that. I've asked her mother, she won't. Everything that you like that could be a job that you like is also something to consider, right? Like I think that there are some of us who maybe really enjoy artistic expression, and that's something that could be a job, right? Like you could professionally sing or dance or things like that. But maybe that's not something that would actually be a job that you like. So for me, I love to cook, I love to bake. Those are things that you can actually do for money and that you can do for a job. But I know that working in a kitchen, working the kind of hours that are needed for people in that industry, those are things that I wouldn't like to do. And, that might make me not like that thing that I really enjoy doing. So I think it's really interesting, thinking about sort of narrowing down and really thinking through, practically speaking, how you might apply the things that you're actually interested in doing. And what I hope we can do in the rest of today's session is really kind of think through some of the specific questions you can ask yourself to help you do exactly that. So how do you know what you'd like to do? Well, you think about yourself. You do a little bit of self-assessment. So self-assessment is about getting to know yourself. You can apply self-assessment to a lot of different kinds of ideas, fields of thought, but for our purposes today, we're really thinking about what's going to work for you as far as career aspirations, not necessarily how you can fit yourself into a particular mold. I think it's much more instructive really to begin from within, then to take in information from outside and kind of compare the two, rather than simply focusing on the outside information and sort of trying to fit yourself into a particular standard. The better that you understand what you actually want to do with your time, whether that's professionally, whether that's, service or volunteer activities that you do in the future, whether that's what you do in the classroom while you're here at Barnard, the better that you really understand those things and the more that you can think critically about those things, the better you're going to be able to make choices that will make you happy. So what kinds of questions can you ask yourself? In the previous experiences that you've had, whether those are, experiences maybe with clubs or athletics or student government, volunteer experiences in or outside of a school institution, work experiences that you've had already, in those kinds of environments, what roles do you gravitate toward? What roles do you enjoy? Are you the type of person who really enjoys doing communications work? Do you feel like you're much more a behind the scenes person rather than a sort of out in front of people person? Think about those things. Think about the kinds of occupations or careers you've encountered in popular culture that interest you, right? So one of the things that I do in my advising is I work with people who are interested in clinical health professions, right? And I always say, a lot of people come to me interested in being a doctor. And I think partly that's to do with the fact that there are a lot of cultural representations of physicians around us. Not as many people know what, for example, a physical therapist is because we don't really have cultural representations of those. So I think it's good to consider the what cultural representations have been able to present to you and what it is that draws you to particular careers through that lens. Think about what careers other people have suggested for you. You may have family members or friends who have said, you should do this, you're really good at X. And sometimes people will hear something like that and have a very positive reaction. Hey, yeah, I am good at that. I really enjoy doing that. Sometimes people will hear something like that and have a much more negative reaction. No, that's not for me, right? I think about those times when you've had those experiences in the past and kind of examine your own reactions. What do you immediately say yes to? What do you immediately say no to? Start to think about, of course, your likes and dislikes, particularly skills that you enjoy using. So if you're a person who really enjoys writing, if you're a person who really enjoys graphic design, if you love data analysis, if you are really good at thinking through big picture ideas and kind of plotting out decisions, all of those kinds of skills are really important for a lot of different kinds of careers. But thinking about the things that you want to emphasize in your work can be really helpful. By that same token, things that you don't enjoy doing are important to consider. If you know that you really do not like fundraising, or you really do not like public speaking, those are things that maybe you de-emphasize in a search. Similarly, things that you do that give you energy, things that make you feel excited, let's say you are a person who just gets a lot of positive energy out of helping other people. That's really, really important. You know, knowing that that's something that is actually going to be restorative for you in day-to-day work is really key. By that same token, activities that tire you out, those are super important to pay attention to. It can be really tough. It's not necessarily, you know, a deal breaker if a career that you're interested in requires you to do things that tire you out, but it's extremely important to be aware of it so that you can take care of yourself. Thematic interests, you know, if there are particular values that you want to live out in your work, those are really important to consider as well. The things that motivate you in life in general, if you can apply those to the work that you do either in college or after, it's oftentimes much easier to motivate yourself to do that work. And for all of the above, try to think about why. You know, there are people for whom, for example, teaching is really, really exhausting. So you'd want to think about why. You know, if teaching roles are tiring for you, is it because maybe you're kind of an introverted person and doing that much public speaking is tough for you? Is it because maybe when you do prefer to work with people, you like to do it on an individual basis and not necessarily a one-to-group basis? Is it because of the particular subject matter that you've been working through in previous roles that you've had? All those kinds of things are really important to consider so that you can kind of figure out next steps that make the most sense. So some of those next steps can be really, really productive if you do them through the lens of networking and mentoring. And I want to talk a little bit about what those things mean and how you can start to do networking and mentoring as an undergraduate that will set a strong foundation for you in the future. So what do those words mean, right? We often talk about them together, and it's important to note that they are different things. So the root word of networking, network, is a collection of contacts that you can call on for professional purposes. These are people maybe that you don't necessarily have a close relationship. Maybe you've met a person through another person, or you are contacting someone who is a member of the Barnard alumni community. These are people who maybe can give you advice or give you a particular piece of information that might be helpful in a job or internship search, for example. A mentor is someone who has experience in an area that's of interest to you, who can help you really navigate decisions and situations. And a mentor is someone that knows you personally, someone who tends to know a lot of the answers to those self-assessment questions that we've already asked because you've shared that information with them. And it's usually a much sort of longer term and more sustained relationship. Networking and mentoring are both really essential for not just getting a job, but for figuring out what kinds of jobs you might actually care about doing. So networking, again, those are professional relationships. Those are people maybe who can give you insight into how a particular industry or even a particular organization within an industry works. Mentoring is much more individualized guidance. These are people who can help you think through the decisions that are important for your career. Both networking and mentoring often have a component of what we call informational interviewing. That's a concept that's really important to get familiar with early on, because one of the best ways that you can learn about careers that you don't already know a ton about is to talk to people who do those jobs. So informational interviewing is always a conversation about an individual's professional experiences. You might ask about the educational background that led to a particular career path. You might ask about how a person got started in an industry. You might ask about what a person really enjoys about the work that they do, about advice that they would have for somebody who is coming into the industry today. All of those kinds of questions are very standard for an informational interview. They can help you not just to learn about a job, an industry, an organization, but they can help you to cultivate relationships. Sometimes informational interviewing and networking can lead to mentoring relationships in the future. And sometimes you can learn about opportunities. For instance, you know, maybe you interview someone who tells you about a fellowship that they did right after college. That can help you decide whether or not maybe that's something you want to apply to so that you can follow a similar career path, for example. So how can you find people Your existing connections, of course, people that you know through family and friends can be part of your network and maybe can turn into mentors in the future. One of the most amazing things about Barnard is our alumni community is fantastically involved and by and large extremely willing to share from their knowledge. I'll talk more when we talk about Beyond Barnard resources about all the ways that alums are involved with us at Beyond Barnard. But in your individual work, you can connect with alums on LinkedIn. You can also use Barnard Connect, which is a Barnard specific online platform where over 1,000 alums from a ton of different industries are available for informal discussions. People who are open to more formal mentoring relationships are there. It's a great way to kind of browse for people who do jobs that you find interesting. So if you get interested in networking and maybe think about doing informational interviewing, how do you reach out? I think it's important to have the message be concise. You should include information about who you are, any connections that you have with the person. So if it's someone that you know through another individual, mention that person. If it's someone you're reaching out to because they went to Barnard in the past, that's great to mention. And the specifics of why you're reaching out. So if you already know that you're interested in exploring a particular career path that that person is on, that's fantastic. If you are in an earlier stage of more information seeking and making decisions about career path, that's also important to note. So in addition to networking and mentoring, the other things that are going to kind of come into decisions that you make, especially about what you do after Barnard, are the experiences that you have while you're here. So when it comes to gaining experiences, the first thing that I tell first-year students, and especially students in the first semester, is to take it slow to the degree that you can. Make sure that you're a student first. You know, as I said at the beginning, the transition to college is not the easiest thing in the world. And you want to save those priority hours of your day for being a student. And you also want to give yourself a space to just get used to what it's like to be in college, especially during a very challenging time. You also want to think about your experiences as laying a foundation for future work. So if you have a class with someone who you think is amazing, whose research or academic work is fantastically interesting to you, or maybe a person who has roles outside of the classroom that are things you want to explore as well, start to identify opportunities with those people. You know, go to office hours, have conversations. Professors can be part of your network and they can be mentors as well. Research different offices on campus that can help you get to places that you want to be. Of course, Beyond Barnard is here, but there are a ton of other opportunities for peer mentoring and support for academics that are available across the institution. I also encourage early career students to come to info sessions. At Beyond Barnard, we schedule a lot of info sessions with employers and graduate schools all year round. And really, those are great ways to informally, without a ton of pressure on you individually, just hear about different paths, different educational and career paths that might appeal to you. Coming to an info session is, for most purposes, not really something that requires a lot of output on your end. Really, it's something that you can do. And if you decide, nope, this isn't for me, you never have to do something in that realm again. But if you find that there are paths that you're curious about that you just kind of don't know anything about at all, info sessions are a really great way to learn more. And I would also encourage people to think of experiences not necessarily in a linear fashion, right? You know, your progress and your career development is going to be something that happens in a stepwise fashion. Sometimes you might be stepping in one direction and you might change direction as you move forward. I really do think it's important to evaluate your experiences as you have them in the classroom, outside of the classroom, experiences with jobs, experiences with all kinds of activities that you could be doing during your college years. taking in that information and really thinking about those experiences from the point of view of the self-assessment questions that we talked about earlier, that's a way really to reflect on your experiences to help you make better choices as you move forward. If an opportunity is interesting, give it a try. You know, you may learn things about yourself that are surprising. And remember that, you know, having a role, you know, whether it's a volunteer position, whether it's a paid employment kind of work, that act of working, of being part of a professional network, of being part of you know, an organization, that's important for you, even maybe in a different way than the nature of that work is important. If a role turns out to be not necessarily something that you want to do for the rest of your life, it's still a role that is helping you to develop skills and competencies that you could use in those things that you want to do in the rest of your life. So I always say, you know, don't count yourself out of particular opportunities. Just because you don't necessarily have experience in something before, everybody starts somewhere. And just because you take a step in a particular direction doesn't mean you have to keep going in that direction forever. If you have or are looking for a campus job or internship, an internship outside of the college as well, think about the skills that you're using in those positions. And then think about which of those skills you like using, which of those skills you would want to do on a day-to-day basis, and what other kinds of jobs require similar skills. We often refer to this as thinking about skills as transferable, and understanding and applying transferable skills can help you to, one, build a better resume and write a better cover letter as you're applying for the next experience, but it also helps you to actually think about what things you want to apply to. If you have currently or get over the course of this year a job or internship, build your relationships with supervisors and coworkers. Again, they're going to be part of your network as well, and they may be people who share with you other opportunities that could be really interesting for you. So with all of that said, I want to talk a little bit about resources that you can use at Beyond Barnard to get you started as you're thinking through these complex topics. So first of all, we have a career exploration toolkit. This is online via Canvas. And essentially the career exploration toolkit is set up to help you walk through some self-assessment questions that will ask you to reflect on what it is that you enjoy doing and what it is that you think you might like to do in the future. After this session, you'll get an email with a link on how to sign up for the career exploration toolkit. So if you're interested in accessing it, keep an eye out for an email later this afternoon with that info. You can also sign up for Barnard Connect. Info in that email coming up as well. So as I mentioned before, Barnard Connect is our digital platform for mentoring between students and alums. And you can search for people based on their career industry, the kind of role that they have. You can search for people who were first generation low-income students. You can search for folks in different race and ethnicity groups, anything that you can think of that might be interesting for you in sort of determining who might make the best mentor. You can filter folks by those. And I really do encourage, especially first-year students, even if you don't reach out yet, you know, you can take a look at the jobs that are there, the people that are there, and sort of get an idea of the possibilities that are out there. Similarly, we have a LinkedIn group. If you use LinkedIn already, you can join our LinkedIn group to connect with other students and alums there. You can also come be with us, not next week, but the week after next for Career Skills Week, where we will talk in depth more about some of these specific career building exercises. So on Monday, October 11th, we'll have a session on resumes. So we'll talk specifically about how you build a resume, how you write bullet points, how you make a resume effective for a particular job opportunity. We'll talk on that Tuesday about cover letters. Similarly, how do you structure a cover letter so that somebody is actually going to read it? There is an art to it, and it's definitely an important skill to practice. On that Thursday, we'll talk about networking. So if you're new to networking, it's not something you've done before, and you want some specific tips on how to reach out to folks, you know, through LinkedIn or through Barnard Connect, please join us for that session. And then that Friday, I will be doing a session on interviewing. So if you're applying for positions and kind of wondering, how do I approach preparing for a professional interview, I'll give you some tips on that Friday. Other important things to think about with Beyond Barnard. One thing that you can do right away is schedule an appointment with a peer career advisor. So at Beyond Barnard, we have 10 peer career advisors who we refer to as PCAs. And our PCAs are students who are trained to help their peers with a variety of kind of career-facing questions. So you can set up an appointment through Handshake, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There are 30-minute slots, and you can talk about things like resume and cover letter review. So if you're applying for jobs on or off campus and you want help tuning up those documents, PCAs can help. If you've got questions about just conducting a job or internship search, they can help with those. If you don't know anything about LinkedIn and want to put together a profile with some individual help, a PCA can help you set up a LinkedIn profile. And they can also help you with individual interview prep if you are actively pursuing opportunities. You can also just come to a PCA and kind of talk about resources and things that you might know about at Beyond Barnard and around Barnard more generally that can help you get started with career exploration. Additionally, everyone here has probably signed up for this very event through Handshake, so you already know a little bit about it at least. But in addition to advising and events, you can use Handshake to look for opportunities. Again, even if you're not in an active job search process, you can still take a look at the opportunities that are available on Handshake to get a sense of the kinds of roles that you might think about applying for in the future. And Handshake has opportunities that are both part-time and full-time, internships and jobs, lots of different kinds of permutations there. I also really strongly encourage first-year students in particular to come and join us for Beyond Barnard events. We do a lot of work, especially with alums, to do education about different career fields. And so, for example, we have a series called Career Insights. We do about 6 or 7 of these every semester. And each edition of Career Insights is focused on a different field. So last week, we did an event on computing and data science, or actually earlier this week. Next week, we have an event on public interest law. The week after that, we'll focus on jobs in marketing and communications. So we try to really switch it up when it comes to industries. And those are places where, again, it's, low pressure. You can come, you can hear what alums in those fields have to say about how they approach their careers and where they are now. And really, there's no pressure. If you decide that a field isn't for you, there's no pressure to follow up on it afterwards. Mentor in Residence is a program that really goes hand in hand with Career Insights. So this is basically an opportunity to meet with an alum in a small group. So it's usually 1 to 3 students meeting with an alum for about 20 minutes to talk about that person's career path and the decisions that they made to lead them to where they are. We have a mentor in residence today who is meeting with students to talk about her career, which has been in consulting, and now she's an MBA student. So looking forward to a longer career in business. We have upcoming mentors in residence who are in different industries like medicine, law, lots of different things as well. And again, we really try to mix up the people that we ask. We also have coming up next Friday on October 8th, our series of alumni chats. So we do this once a semester, and basically it's like a bunch of mentors in residence all on the same day. So you can meet with alums in a wide range of industries. We'll do it via Zoom this semester. So you can sign up for time to talk to folks who are in all different kinds of jobs across the country and even outside the US. You'll get more information in the email that I promised earlier about how to learn about who we have for that event and how to sign up for a slot to meet with an alum. We also do panels on graduate school options. So if you're interested, potentially in attending a graduate program in the future, keep a lookout for events that have to do specifically with that field. So for example, last year we did events on social work, graduate school in the arts, graduate school for physician assistant and nurse practitioner careers. And again, really trying to represent as many different options as possible. And then finally, you can also keep an eye out for career exploration events. So if you want to think more deeply and in a group setting about some of the things that we talked about early in this presentation, career exploration workshops are a really great way to do that. So all of that said, we do a lot, and we're here really to try to help you with all of the questions that you have about life after Barnard and life outside of Barnard now. And I will open it up for questions. So we've got a question in the chat about signing up for Career Insights and Mentor in Residence. So we always publicize these in Beyond Barnard's weekly newsletter. So keep an eye out for BB Weekly. It comes out on Wednesday afternoons. You can also search for either Mentors in Residence or Career Insights under events in Handshake, and you can see everything that is planned for the semester there already. And other questions are welcome. How do externships work? Mary, can you give me a little bit of context in terms of what you mean when you say externship? Oh, yes. Okay. So externships as in sort of short-term experiences that allow undergrads to kind of shadow in a particular job or industry. We've done these in the past. They've kind of been suspended since COVID for obvious reasons. But historically, we've had alums who have volunteered, for instance, to have undergraduates kind of come, be part of the workplace, learn the rhythms, see how things work for maybe a day, for instance. And those are opportunities that definitely you can look for through us. There are also opportunities that potentially can come up through mentoring relationships. So if you, for instance, establish a relationship with someone who, say, works in New York and does something that's really interesting to you, that kind of short-term shadowing is something that oftentimes people are really open to. So it can be something that you kind of negotiate on an individual basis, but I would say it's helpful if you have, you kind of build up a relationship with the person first. So question about when most undergrads start doing internships. It varies a lot. I would say that, the earliest that we usually recommend for first years to start looking for internships would be the summer following the first year. But, what people do during that time really depends a lot on their interests, maybe the career field that they're interested in. There are some industries that have much more structured internship programs for oftentimes the earliest is usually second year students, and kind of a lot more structured recruiting. And then there are industries that have very, very loose recruiting structures, not necessarily as formalized as others. So I think you may see a lot of events on campus relating to consulting and finance. Those are at some of the big tech companies will do a lot of recruiting in the fall. And those are often, those opportunities are often really visible, but that's because those fields have much more kind of strict recruiting structures. For those who are interested, for instance, in maybe more like scientific research or nonprofit work or work in the arts, a lot of times there's less of an infrastructure around recruiting, and so opportunities may be available later in the year, in the spring or even early in the summer. So it depends on the person, it depends on the industry as well. Other questions? I'll stick around for a minute in case anyone wants to ask a question. Afterwards, I'll stop the recording as well. Oh, sorry. Is it hard to get internships with minimal experience? Well, that's a really good question. I would really encourage you to think about coming to events on like resume building, for instance, because experience doesn't necessarily have to mean experience in a particular industry or in a particular kind of role. Experiences that you've had on a volunteer basis or in part-time jobs in other industries, things like that, things that you've done prior to coming to college, they can all be things that you kind of marshal as part of an application for an internship. And so, as I mentioned earlier, things like transferable skills are really important to keep in mind. Just because you haven't had an internship previously doesn't mean that you can't get one. It's everybody has to start somewhere. So it's really about thinking through your previous experiences and how to translate those into job documents. One of our by far best resources for this really is peer career advisors. So if you're thinking about, how do I translate my resume from high school to college, please set up a time to meet with a PCA. They are awesome. And this is one of the things that they actually really love doing, working with people who are transitioning into college and thinking about the kinds of roles they want to be applying for in the future. Events during Career Skills Week are going to be on Zoom. So right now, Beyond Barnard events are on Zoom and they will be recorded, but we do encourage you to come virtually if you can and participate in those workshops. So everything that Beyond Barnard is doing right now is going to be totally virtual. We will communicate as things change over the course of the academic year. Any other questions for now? Thank you all so much for coming. Like I said, I'll stick around for a second if anybody has questions for me, but I really appreciate it. Have a great weekend and enjoy this pretty weather we're having while it's still here.